Hello and welcome to another episode of Xplained, where we take a deep dive into the biggest stories of the day. He may still be around 50 days away from taking office, but President-elect Donald Trump has got the ball rolling on one of his key election promises. Ahead of his inauguration on the 20th of January next year, the 47th US president has threatened tariffs on imports from 3 of America's key trading partners. He states he will sign the executive order on the first day of his presidency. So what is a tariff, and why is Trump imposing them? Which nations will Trump place levies on? What will the global and domestic impact be? And what does a deadly street drug have to do with this wide-reaching policy shift? Before we go into any specifics, let's first understand what a tariff is. Put simply, a tariff is a tax placed on imports of goods that cross international borders, in this case goods that come into the United States from other nations. The US imports more goods than it exports. This is known as a trade deficit. Donald Trump's view is that introducing high tariffs on foreign imports will push American businesses to bring their manufacturing back into the States and in turn boost the US economy. Manufacturing is cheaper outside of America, even with the additional transportation costs. Trump hopes heavy tariffs will change that, while he also says these tariffs will remain in place until the 3 nations can curb the number of migrants and drugs moving into America.
And they have to get approval, and they will get approval. If they don't get approval, we'll have to think in terms of tariffs or whatever. But
in 2018, during his first term as president, Trump imposed tariffs on China and metal imports. But this time around, Trump is targeting all goods from America's top 3 trading partners. The president-elect announced 25% tariffs for all imports coming from the border nations of Mexico and Canada, while an additional 10% tariff has been placed on goods coming from China. Last year, over $1.3 trillion worth of imports came into the United States from these 3 nations. That equates to over a third of all imports into the US. But what is America importing from these countries? Well, Mexico is the largest exporter of motor vehicles and parts into the States. The 25% tariff is expected to increase the cost of most cars sold within America and pose a risk to US manufacturing plants. Mexico's economy minister highlighted the potential threat to jobs for US citizens if these tariffs are imposed.
Entonces el impacto sobre las empresas es enorme. Más o menos pensamos que al final estos impuestos van a afectar al consumidor en los Estados Unidos, pero también a las empresas, y se perderían alrededor de 400,000 empleos.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also responded to Trump's announcement. Canada is set for a 25% tax on all exports to the US. The nation supplies America with almost 60% of its crude oil imports.
I don't think the idea of going to war with the United States is what anyone wants. What we will do is stand up for Canadian jobs, as we have before, as we will continue to. Stand up for the prosperity we create when we work together. Stand up for the challenges that we're facing.
China, who are set for a huge 35% tariffs on all goods going into the US, is a major exporter of electronics and technology. But for President-elect Donald Trump, there is another key product coming from China that he is targeting. China is the largest producer of chemicals that go into a drug called fentanyl, a high-strength synthetic opioid. Gangs also export the drug directly into the Americas. While fentanyl is used legally as a pain reliever and for sedation, its recreational use has skyrocketed, especially in America. Fentanyl is potent, and extremely potent at that. It is 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. Like other opioids, fentanyl is extremely addictive, but what makes it so deadly is that just a small amount can lead to an overdose. Just 2 milligrams or 1/500th of a gram can be deadly. Around 200 Americans die every day from a fentanyl overdose. Of the 108,000 overdose deaths, almost 75,000 of those were caused by fentanyl last year. On his Truth Social platform, the president-elect accused China of failing to follow through on promises to combat sales of the drug to the US, despite the 2 parties apparently holding talks. And it's not just China who are involved in the fentanyl trade. Mexico and Canada play a key part in the production and distribution of the deadly opioid, according to the US Drug Enforcement Administration. Let's explore the different ways in which fentanyl goes from China into the United States. Firstly, fentanyl arrives in the US directly from China via mail. These packages are mostly under 1 kilogram, but this is still enough for up to 5 million potentially lethal doses. Fentanyl powder is also shipped to Canada, where it can be mixed with heroin to make it more potent. This may then be smuggled into the US and sold. Drug users do not always know they are taking fentanyl when consuming what they think is just heroin. This also happens in the States, with powder from China being shipped directly to the US to then be cut with heroin and sold again. Below the border, powder fentanyl is also sent to Mexico, where it is then cut and processed and smuggled across the border into the United States. Alternatively, the chemicals can be sent to Mexico, where laboratories then produce the fentanyl before it is smuggled across the US border. Given Trump's clean sweep taking the presidency, along with both the House and the Senate, he shouldn't face any major issues in passing these tariffs. With one eye on the economy, the other is firmly on tackling the deadly synthetic opioid crisis gripping the United States. With that, we come to the end of this episode of Xplained. Thank you for watching NewsX World.